General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, June 18th. It was just a brief, seemingly innocent exchange between Felicia and Willow. On the surface, it looked like a simple, helpful update from someone who genuinely cares. Felicia, always trying to be the supportive and resourceful presence in the room, casually mentioned that she had finally arranged a concrete plan to help Drew start communicating again. It was meant to be wonderful news. A medical breakthrough. A moment of profound relief for a family that has been through so much. But if you watched Willow's face in that exact second, the reaction was completely wrong. At first, it didn't seem important. People process good news differently, after all, and shock can take many forms. But the more I looked at the sheer, unadulterated terror flashing behind her eyes, the more I realized we were witnessing something entirely different. The color completely drained from her face, her breath hitched, and her posture stiffened as if she had just been handed a devastating death sentence rather than a hopeful medical update. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why would the prospect of Drew regaining his ability to communicate trigger such absolute panic in Willow? We know she has been walking a very dangerous, incredibly fragile tightrope lately, entering into quiet, desperate negotiations with Jack. She's been waiting in the shadows, biding her time, hoping to gather the perfect blackmail material from Jack to use against Drew. The entire foundation of her current survival strategy relies entirely on Drew remaining silent, isolated, and unable to defend himself or expose the dark truths she is hiding. Felicia's innocent intervention was the psychological equivalent of pulling the linchpin out of a live grenade while Willow was still holding it tightly in her hands. The sheer irony of the situation is staggering. Felicia truly thought she was handing over a miracle, but in reality, she was systematically destroying a carefully constructed house of cards. Willow is now trapped in a terrifying race against time, desperately trying to figure out how to delay Drew's recovery without making her sabotage obvious to the people watching her. It is an agonizing position to be in, and you can see the desperation beginning to consume her from the inside out. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that Willow's internal panic is just one single thread in a much larger, darker tapestry that is currently draping over the town. If we pull that thread, it leads us directly into the heart of another bitter, simmering conflict. We have to look at the confrontation happening right now between Tracy and Brooklyn. Tracy is a formidable force of nature, a woman who observes absolutely everything and forgets absolutely nothing. When she finally corners Brooklyn, it is not just a simple family disagreement or a passing argument. It is a full-blown interrogation. Tracy is demanding an ultimatum, and she is leaving no room for escape. She looks Brooklyn dead in the eye, stripping away all the pleasantries, and forces her to make an impossible choice. Do you believe my story, or do you believe Willow? The tension in the room during that standoff is thick enough to choke on. Brooklyn has been playing a very dangerous, reckless game, orchestrating a massive, tangled mess by framing Willow to look like the driver who fled the scene of a terrible accident. Brooklyn is holding on to toxic secrets that could completely destroy her own life, especially with her husband actively investigating the very crime she manufactured out of thin air. When Tracy demands absolute loyalty, she is unknowingly pressing her finger directly onto Brooklyn's most vulnerable, exposed nerve. Brooklyn cannot afford to speak the truth, because the truth means ruin. But lying directly to Tracy's face is a risk. Very few people survive without permanent scars. I keep coming back to the heavy, suffocating silence that stretches between them in that room. It is the sound of a legacy fracturing from the inside out. Brooklyn is trapped like an insect in a web of her own making, and Tracy is standing there with a lit match, more than ready to burn the whole thing down if she does not get the honest answers she feels she is owed. It doesn't seem accidental that all these women are suddenly finding themselves backed into terrifying corners at the exact same time. It feels like a synchronized, inevitable collapse of their carefully maintained lies. And this brings us to the shadow beneath the story. While Willow and Brooklyn are fighting their respective battles in the harsh light of day, there is a completely different kind of tragedy unfolding quietly in the dark. I am talking about the goodbye between Valentine and Carly. On the surface, it is a heartbreaking, tear-filled farewell between two people who have found themselves caught in an absolutely impossible situation. Valentine is preparing to leave, stepping away from the only light he has known to step into the shadows and find a mysterious, dangerous contact known only as Z. He is walking into a highly volatile mission that he knows, deep down in his bones, he might never return from. The emotion in that room is heavy, suffocating, and dripping with unspoken grief. He looks at Carly, and there is a profound, chilling sense of finality in his eyes. He is accepting his fate. He is offering himself up as a willing sacrifice to fix the catastrophic mess, refusing to let anyone else take the fall or be used as leverage for a rescue operation that has spiraled wildly out of control. But there is an unseen connection here, a hidden emotional conflict that makes this goodbye so much more than just a tragic romance between two crossed lovers. Valentine is carrying heavy ghosts with him. The cryptic phone call he made weeks ago to that remote French facility under a fake alias is still hovering over them like a dark, gathering storm cloud. Carly is standing there, watching the man she cares for walk away, knowing deep in her heart that the severe consequences of his past actions are about to crash down on her the moment the door clicks shut. The shadow beneath this farewell is the unspoken, terrifying realization that Valentine's noble departure does not actually make Carly safe. It makes her the primary unprotected target. He is leaving her behind in a city that is rapidly becoming a ruthless hunting ground for powerful agencies. The grief in their parting is not just about physical separation. It is about the terrifying, paralyzing vulnerability that comes next. I can't shake the feeling that Valentine knows exactly what kind of wolves he is leaving her to face, and that realization is silently breaking his heart into a million pieces. This is where the narrative shifts from quietly tragic to genuinely alarming. Because while Valentine is disappearing into the night, the predators are already circling the perimeter. Let us talk about Ross. Ross is not just a man looking for simple answers. He is a man who knows exactly how to use fear and intimidation as a precision weapon. We see him at the estate, cornering Lulu in a place where she should feel safe. The way he threatens her, the way he applies relentless psychological pressure, it is methodical. It is cruel. It is calculated to break her spirit. Lulu is completely out of her depth, trembling and panicking as the crushing weight of the intelligence Ross possesses begins to suffocate her. Maybe there is another layer here. It is entirely possible that Ross does not just want information about the fugitives on the run. I keep wondering whether Ross is deliberately using Lulu to draw someone else, someone much more dangerous, out of the shadows. What if we're missing something fundamental about Ross's overall strategy? We know that someone has been quietly protecting Lulu, hovering just out of sight in the background, making sure she does not completely shatter under the immense strain. Cassius has been lingering nearby, carrying his own incredibly heavy burden of dark secrets and unresolved guilt. If Ross pushes Lulu hard enough, if he makes her scream loud enough, perhaps he is hoping that her hidden protector will step out into the blinding light and make a fatal, irreversible mistake. The psychological warfare being waged in those cold stone halls is absolutely chilling to witness. Lulu is being treated as nothing more than live bait, and the sheer terror she is experiencing is entirely real and deeply visceral. She is holding on to shocking, explosive information secrets that could permanently alter the fates of the people she loves most, and the unbearable pressure to keep silent is tearing her sanity apart from the inside. And that leads directly into the growing tension that is currently suffocating the entire town. You can physically feel the air getting thinner. You can sense that something terrible, something massive, is rapidly approaching. Because Ross does not stop with Lulu. The moment Valentine is gone, the exact second Carly is truly alone and vulnerable, the steel trap snaps shut with terrifying speed. Ross and his heavily armed team of agents arrive directly at Carly's house. They do not come with polite questions or gentle inquiries. They come with the full, intimidating, overwhelming force of their shadowy organization. Carly is completely, hopelessly cornered. She is standing in the middle of her own home, surrounded by cold-eyed people who view her as nothing more than a piece of leverage on a board. The walls are literally closing in on her, shrinking the room until there is nowhere left to run and nowhere left to hide. This is not a sudden, cheap twist thrown in for shock value. This is the inevitable, terrifying mathematical result of every single desperate decision that has been made over the past few weeks. Carly thought she was a crucial part of a heroic rescue mission, but she has now become the ultimate hostage in her own living room. The aggressive interrogation about Valentine's whereabouts is just the beginning of her nightmare. The real danger, the true horror of the situation, is that Ross might already know the answers to the questions he is asking her. He might just be waiting for Carly to tell a single lie so he can justify tearing her entire life apart piece by piece. The tension in that scene is unbearable because we know how profoundly isolated Carly truly is in this exact moment. There is no cavalry coming to save her. The man who would have stood between her and the wolves is already gone, chasing phantoms in the dark, leaving her to face the firing squad completely alone. And the creeping unease does not stop there. It bleeds into every single corner of the narrative, infecting everyone it touches. Think about Lulu, reeling from the vicious threats, trembling uncontrollably in the dark aftermath of her terrifying encounter with Ross. She has finally reached her absolute breaking point. The fear has finally eclipsed her ability to keep the dangerous secrets locked away in her mind. We see her preparing to confess everything to Dante. She is desperately gathering the shattered, jagged pieces of her courage, getting ready to unleash a truth that will inevitably cause a massive, destructive explosion in their lives. The emotional undercurrents swirling here are utterly devastating. Dante has been so incredibly supportive, so willing to blindly defend the people he cares about, completely unaware of the massive storm that is about to hit him head on. When Lulu finally opens her mouth to speak, it will not just be a simple confession. It will be a nuclear detonation in the middle of their relationship. The agonizing anticipation of that impending conversation is hard to watch. We are watching a terrified woman walk slowly toward the edge of a cliff, knowing that the exact moment she tells Dante the truth, there is absolutely no going back to the way things were. The complex dynamics of their relationship, the fragile, beautiful trust they have carefully navigated and rebuilt, will be tested in brutal ways they are completely unprepared for. And the deepest tragedy of it all is that Lulu feels she has no other choice left. The relentless threats from Ross have violently stripped away her final illusions of control. She is a woman backed into a dark corner, much like Carly, much like Brooke Lynn, much like Willow. It is fascinating, in a morbid way, how all these completely separate threads are beginning to weave together into a single, cohesive, suffocating narrative of desperation. I keep coming back to the sheer, overwhelming volume of dark secrets currently vibrating just beneath the surface of this town. Every single person we have talked about today is holding on to a massive lie that is actively destroying them from the inside. Willow is lying about her ruthless intentions with Jack. Brooke Lynn is lying about the devastating accident. Carly is lying to protect a man who has already left. Lulu is holding on to dangerous, explosive intelligence. And Tracy, Ross, and Felicia are the unknowing catalysts, the stray sparks that are threatening to ignite this massive, unstable powder keg and blow everything to pieces. The more I analyze the frantic movements of these characters, the more I realize that none of them truly understand the full, terrifying scope of the danger they are currently in. They're all operating on partial, fragmented information, making desperate, blind moves in the dark, foolishly believing they can somehow outsmart the inevitable consequences of their actions. But the house always wins in the end. The truth always finds a way to claw its bloody way out of the dirt. And when it finally does, the collateral damage is going to be absolutely catastrophic. The shadows in the room are growing longer by the second, and the safe spaces they once relied on are rapidly disappearing into the dark. Look closely at the cold architecture of the trap Ross has set. He didn't just stumble into Carly's house by accident. He timed it perfectly. He waited patiently until the exact moment the protective shield was lowered. This level of tactical, calculated precision suggests that the intelligence he received recently is far more comprehensive and dangerous than anyone realizes. What if we are missing something huge about the true scope of his investigation? What if Carly is not just being questioned as a simple accomplice, but is actively being framed for the larger, more sinister conspiracy? The possibility is deeply chilling. If Ross decides to take Carly into custody tonight, she could very well find herself thrown into the exact same nightmare scenario that she was trying to rescue others from, locked away in the dark with no hope of escape. And what about the massive ripple effects that are bound to follow? If Carly falls, who steps up to fill the void? If Lulu confesses, how does Dante react to the betrayal? Will his deep instinct to protect the woman he loves override his sworn duty to the law, or will the shocking revelation fracture his moral compass entirely? Something feels incredibly unfinished about Dante's current trajectory. He has been loudly questioning the motives of others, demanding strict accountability, but he is about to be handed a heavy truth that might force him to compromise everything he stands for. The psychological burden shifting violently from Lulu to Dante is going to be a fascinating, albeit incredibly painful, transition to witness in the coming days. I can't shake the feeling that we are merely standing in the eerily quiet eye of the hurricane. The initial violent winds have battered the characters, violently stripping away their defenses and their lives. But the true, absolute destructive force of the storm is still waiting just over the dark horizon. The wild desperation in Willow's eyes, the cold, unyielding fury in Tracy's ultimatums, the heartbreaking, heavy resignation in Valentine's goodbye, and the sheer, paralyzing terror of Carly being cornered in her own home, these are all just the quiet prelude to the disaster. The atmosphere is completely saturated with a heavy sense of impending doom pressing down on everyone. We are left standing alone in the dark, watching the long shadows stretch across the floorboards. There is no neat, happy resolution here. No sudden hero rushing in at the last second to save the day. Just a collection of deeply flawed, terrified people slowly realizing that the walls have finally closed in on them. Lulu is standing trembling on the precipice of a confession that will shatter her entire world. Carly is staring down the cold barrel of an interrogation that could permanently end her freedom. Willow is frantically, desperately trying to stop a medical miracle from happening just to save her own skin. And Brooklyn is staring directly into the unforgiving eyes of a matriarch who will not accept anything less than absolute, unquestioning submission. The story is unfolding, piece by painful piece, and we are right there in the room with them, feeling the freezing draft from the open door. We don't have all the answers yet. We don't know who will break first under the pressure, who will survive the toxic fallout, or who will be completely consumed by the dark secrets they tried so desperately to keep buried. The tension is a living, breathing thing now, coiled impossibly tight and ready to strike at any moment. We are walking slowly down a very long, very dark hallway, and every single door we open reveals another terrifying nightmare waiting in the shadows. And that is exactly where we have to leave them for now. Suspended in this agonizing, breathless state of anticipation. The invisible threads are pulled taut, the shadows are deep and unforgiving, and the heavy silence right before the scream is absolutely deafening. Something terrible is coming. You can feel it in the cold air. You can see it in their panicked eyes. The unfinished story continues to unravel before us, and all we can do is watch, wait, and wonder just how incredibly dark it is going to get before the dawn finally breaks over this fractured town.
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.